When are the Liberals properly going to vet their candidates? Fellas, you need to be careful what you say on podcasts because it lasts forever.
But this particular candidate, they said this in July last year.
Not only did they let him run an unwinnable seat, but they put the bloke in campaign HQ and this stuff's not, this isn't borderline stuff. This is batshit crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people and organisations who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in your world in 2026, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. If you want to join those wonderful supporters of our podcast and financially support our show so we can continue to produce great episodes each week, then we encourage you to click on the link in the show notes and subscribe to the Patreon of Socially Democratic. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. For over a century, Maurice Blackburn has stood up for fairness, championing the rights of everyday Australians and shaping landmark legal reforms. Today, they're harnessing new technologies to make justice more accessible, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of modern Australia. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday evening on the lands of the Ngara peoples. I'm in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. Never been here. And I just always thought it was like the Adelaide Hills, but turns out, no, it's a bigger deal. And I apologise to the people of the Blue Mountains because it's actually beautiful. And it is our second episode of the South Australian Election Weekly Recap, 8 days to go. And to help me recap the week that was, I am once again joined by a senior advisor from Capital and a former Chief of Staff to various ministers and successful South Australian governments, Matt Clemow. Welcome back.
How are you, Stephen? I'm joining you from the land of the Boondik people in the state seat of Mount Gambier in the far southeast.
Beautiful. And she had a starring role on MacLeod's Daughters for 7 seasons and won 5 Logie Awards. No. She is the Executive Director for the McCull Institute of South Australia and a former campaigner both in the Northern Territory and in South Australia. It's great to have her back on the show as well. Hannah MacLeod, how are you?
Thank you. Good, thank you. On Ghana land in Adelaide.
Did you ever get shit when MacLeod's Daughters was on in high school? Well, you'd have been in high school when MacLeod's Daughter was on?
Yeah, but I somehow was the wrong age or something for it. And as you know, different spelling. So
that is true.
I try to skip over that one.
I had a friend who was a boom operator on MacLeod's Daughters. That's as close as I've ever got to celebrity status right there.
The very first political story that I wrote as a journalist in 2004 was the good guy from MacLeod's Daughters, and not the guy that ended up on all the horrible charges, but the good guy, for reasons that made zero sense, wanting a media story endorsing Kate Ellis for the federal seat of Adelaide. And it was the first political story that I ever wrote. So.
Wow. I wonder if that boom operator had some role in it.
Nick something, yeah.
See, this is why people tune into this podcast when it comes to the South Australian election, is this niche information and factoids that you get that you don't get on any other political podcast.
Miles Pollard was his name. I just worked it out.
G'day. Hi, Miles.
Hi, Miles.
Hope you're doing well. All right. No polling to report on this week, so let's get straight into the week that was. And no campaign launches or leaders' debates as we are recording. There are 2 this week, but we'll have to do them next week. But there certainly has been some movement and colour and a bit of controversy. I want to talk about major policy announcements that have come out this week. Starting with the red team. Hannah, there's been a sort of a theme this week from the Malinauskas campaign in terms of the announcements they've made. Give us a bit of a rundown of what they've dropped.
This is the one I've been waiting for. This is sort of Mally's baby. So he led the nation on the social media ban for under 16s. His big focus has always been getting kids off screen and getting them active. So this week we've seen across a few days him make announcements to do just that. One of them is 150 hours of mandatory active learning per week in school. So this is things like incorporating sport, drama, just being a little bit more physical rather than sitting on a chair at a desk all day, every day at school. Free school camps, free activities before and after school, expanding sports vouchers to 16, 17 and 18-year-olds, free school holiday come and try sessions. The list goes on. Like I said, this has been one of Malinauskas' focus. He's got making these announcements with a big banner behind him that say kids off screens. So been waiting for this one. He's been working these ones up for quite a while.
He was sort of the first mover in Australian politics on this particular issue. And it's interesting when you think about the response by the federal government to it. This podcast in particular has been a little critical of the government in terms of the federal government in particular of being risk adverse. But this was one area where they picked something that a small percentage of the population was very opposed to and vocal about it, but there was an underbelly that the vast majority of people, in particular parents, were very much in favour of. And Mally obviously picked the wins on this one a long, long time ago, and he's now doubling down on it. What are you getting a sense from in terms of the additional announcements that he's made this week? In terms of is he just targeting parents around their relationship with their kids and what their kids are doing, or is there a cost of living component to these series sets of announcements as well?
A bit of both. So the free school camp, is huge. That's for parents. That's a cost of living measure, but it's more than that. It's sort of it's knowing that there might be a kid that goes home to their parents and doesn't give them the permission slip for the school camp because they've heard mum and dad talk at the dining room table and say, how are we going to pay our bills this week? And the kid might pocket that and just not go. So this is really more that social mobility piece as well, to say, well, every kid, this is off the back of them making public school free. So every kid should go to school. Every kid should be able to be engaged in activities before and after school, sport, drama, and then they should be able to go to school camp with their peers without fear of being the one that they can't afford to go.
Matt, electorally, where would you think this is going to have a really positive impact for Labor?
I think probably in a kind of broader narrative sense, it ties into what this Malinauskas cabinet looks like and what the parliament looks like. I think we've spoken before about how different this cabinet looks like in an age sense to the cabinets that we worked for, and governments all kind of around the place. You've got, by my count, all but 2 cabinet ministers with school-age kids, if not kind of early learning kids. We know that this leads to a fundamentally different debate. In terms of where is this playing out, well, it's everywhere that they have already won and probably aren't targeting anyway. Where is it being reinforced in an equity sense? This is to kind of use the federal kind of equivalent. It's the Boothby voter. It's the Sturt voter. It's in those push Liberal-held seats that Labor is now targeting, showing the parents there that you can't do federal tax cuts for cost of living, but you can do $600 in school fees here per kid, $500 in school camp per kid. The other part that they did, I think, to kind of show the kind of breadth of what they're trying to do was they introduced some recreational fishing part into the kind of sport voucher equivalent. Again, I think to show here are the non-screen things you can do for free. Here are the non-screen things you can do without paying, expensive piano lessons or, whatever the kind of equivalent is.
And there's always been a little bit, in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, there's been a bit of a narrative by some commentators that Labor, broadly speaking, I'm talking about either a state or a federal level, but the Labor Party have only turned their attention to voters in marginal seats and have ignored their working class base. But I would imagine that a policy like this as well would resonate just as well with a traditional blue-collar working class Labor voter in an area like Elizabeth as it would in some of these seats that we're looking to take off of the Tories, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, the sophomore surge is probably well and truly on anyway, but if you look at that class of 22 that won, Minister Rhiannon Pearce in kind of the older traditional Golden Grove, next to Blair Boyer, who as Education Minister probably deserves a fair tip of the hat in all this stuff as well. In the inner southwest, Nadia Clancy, kind of in and around Clarence Park. They are the public school families that we're talking about that will have the largest impact out of these, and then of course through all of the seats that are already held by kind of more than 10% in that working class areas.
Hannah, I want to go to you in terms of what we saw from the Libs this week, even before you mention the stuff that they focused on, have they responded to some of these announcements? Like, are we seeing a reaction from the action of the government, or are they saying, well, we've got our announcement agenda and we're just going to stick to it?
They're not responding. They're doing their own thing. The other thing is that Labor have quite clearly this whole election campaign dedicated themes and weeks. So you'll see, for example, Housing Week, and it will be day after day of a housing policy announcement. This week it's the kids off screens, and that followed on from Education Week last week. So it fits in really, really nicely, and it ties it all together. Once they've then got this package of announcements, they'll put it up in a succinct way. So it might be on a flyer, or it might be on their website, and they've got the policies all neatly ordered. You can go onto the Labor Party website, housing, The Liberals haven't taken that approach, and it makes it actually very hard. In researching this podcast, okay, what have the Liberals done? It makes it really, really hard. I think we spoke last week about that they're struggling to get airtime as it is. There's war happening, there's this and that. So they're already quite far down in the advertiser. As soon as they get bumped for the next thing, it's very hard to know what they've actually announced. The two announcements that I saw just through social media, one was on discounts for IVF, which is good policy, but it seemed to me quite similar to Labor's policy, which they already announced during Health Week. And then you had another one which looked good. It was Ashton Hurn sitting in the cockpit of an aeroplane announcing defence and space apprenticeships. They're both good policies, I suppose, but they have nothing to do with each other, and it's just bizarre, and it's just a bit out of sync as to where we are. We obviously are going to have a jobs and skills boom. I think a defence and space apprenticeship is good policy, but it just is so distinct from the way that the Labor government here were announcing their workforce and skills thing. Because every policy was layered, and this is why we're doing this. This is how much it is. It just was a lot more succinct. I think part of the Liberals' problems is when they're announcing these policies, they are very scattergun. They're choosing a different topic every day. They're not responding to what Labor's doing, which is fine. And then issues of the day just push them even further down.
Matt, I'm wondering about. I mean, obviously the opposition leader is a rookie. She literally is a rookie. This is her first term in the parliament, and for her to be running for re-election for the first time, but also leading the top of the ticket, would put a lot of pressure on someone and the scrutiny of a campaign. Is this inconsistency and this scattergun approach that Hannah's talking about? I mean, is this on her? Do you have any insight into her office? Is her office a reflection of her own leadership in terms of inexperience, or is this something that we've just sort of historically seen from the South Australian Libs over the last 2 or 3 campaign cycles?
Yeah, I'd probably say 3 things. From the end, I think I view all these things in the terms of kind of bench strength and what you have around you. I think one of the reasons why Stephen Marshall lost in 2022 was he lost the bench strength around him. And, my view of campaigns is you need other senior people out doing the heavy things to clear your air to go do the positive parts. Ashton Hurn's been out talking about One Nation policies and leaks and a whole lot of shit that she should not be talking about, because outside of the shadow treasurer, there's really been no one else out there doing any heavy lifting. In terms of other two things which are particular bespoke to here, her chief staff's on legislative council ticket and is in a possibly losable spot, whereas it would have started thinking that, Libs have never not got to 3 on the ticket here, and they're a huge chance of not getting 3 on the ticket. So I assume that's a pretty unfun environment. On top of that, because of the size of the polls, we've seen an extraordinary amount of time by the opposition leader in her local seat, which should be north of 15, promising I think it was north of $300 million Brossard Hospital, I think, playing proper on-the-ground defence, handing out at the shopping centre, essentially campaigning in her own seat rather than outside of that. So I think if you put the 3 of those things together, that is the sum of the parts as to where we are. But I think primarily campaigns are hard and you need senior heavy lifters around you, and I don't think we've seen that outside of Ben Hood in this campaign.
What did you say her margin is? Around 15 points?
I said it's a 15% seat. I think it's around 6.5 or something now, but it's said in a normal world. This is a seat that Olsen had before he went to the Senate, before he came back and became Premier. A guy called Ivan Venning, who's the uncle of the new federal parliamentarian Tom Venning, had it on north of 15 for years and years. And then Stephen Clemow, who was first-time minister, as in elected into Parliament, went straight to Cabinet, and touted as future leader, look at it the other way. It is the second last seat to fall in the state. That's how safe it is.
And it's 11.9.
And they're dropping that kind of money on that kind of announcement. That is...
Yeah, north of 300 mil on a hospital for that seat only.
That is telling.
Yeah.
That is telling. Okay, good. Not a great week for Labor with Health Minister Chris Picton in the news. Hannah, what's your reflections on that?
I'll quickly summarise the story. On Wednesday night, a grieving widow was on the news, essentially saying her husband had passed away after being ramped in an ambulance. We've talked last week about ambulance ramping being a soft spot, the Achilles heel for this Labor government. She mentioned on that news cycle that she'd submitted a complaint. So the Health Minister's office went into their emails to look for that complaint. They found an email supposedly from the man praising the great health system. That email was then released to journalists, and it turns out it was a different man with the same name. So this is a serious misstep from an otherwise very good, polished campaign that Labor has run. It's obviously got the news cycles. You've got the opposition leader demanding that the minister resign. He's already said he won't. The Premier said even if he tried to, I wouldn't accept his resignation.
And it's interesting because last week we talked about what were some of the weaker parts of the Labor offering and what would the Liberals say about Labor, and one of them was ramping. Mm-hmm. And we said we acknowledged it, but I guess the view of you two were it's not something that's going to dominate the conversation. Do we see, with 8 days to go, do we see that is now going to become a conversation that may dominate the news, notwithstanding the Nationals leader knocking it off the front page? But there's always a new day and a story can kick along. Are we getting a sense from the Tories that they are going to try and give this a bit of a nudge as we head into early voting?
I mean, I think in a campaign central sense, if you're a Liberal HQ, you'd be trying to talk about health and ramping every day that you possibly could. What's probably been so clear about the last couple of days, and said Hannah's right, it's been ugly, it's been horrible, and the best kind of media cycle that Ashton Hurn Ashton Hurn had was kind of eaten up within 4 or 5 hours. What's been clear to me is we're in that crazy, messy 10 days out part of the campaign, kind of the James Diaz kind of part. Today we had Blair Boyer, who's been the kind of Labor campaign spokesperson, going out with a video of let's cautiously phrase it as, batshit crazy US podcast from the candidate opposite him in his own seat, saying feminism is demonic, gay marriage isn't real, something about witches melting on the church in front of him. And then we'll come to this later in the podcast, but even more upper house chaos. I think in voter world at the moment, this is starting to look at what was a really significant, substantial, legitimate issue. We've now turned into he said, she said, she said, he said, he said, she said, he said. They all look mad. And I think that's probably where we are until we get to pre-poll territory now.
Sticking with you, Matt, and I'm keen for your thoughts on this as well, Hannah, but I mean, Matt, your background and your entry into this world was through the media. Just explain to folks from outside of South Australia I went to the uniqueness of the South Australian media landscape, but the way it is a bit different to Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, with only being one major newspaper. How do you fight to get eyeballs on any of the sort of the platforms, and which ones would you want to be prioritising in terms of earned media?
Yeah, and also to be fair, I mean, I'm an old man now, and it's different to even the campaigns that I was involved in. But you have a morning advertising news cycle, which is followed by 2 a.m. morning news cycles before 9 a.m. 5AA, which is the kind of Laws, Jones, Mitchell kind of equivalent, and then an ABC morning, which was once the most feared thing in the country, and is now probably a bit more upbeat and probably not the kind of dire part that it was. So you've got kind of the cycle of the morning ties of drop ends up happening over that morning radio. They might use morning radio to drop something else, and then that follows into a TV story extension of that. And then AM radio for the rest of the day is pretty non-political. So you've essentially got morning story followed by what happens after that, and then everything's wrapped up by 2 o'clock. And more, in a normal sense, you've got more people getting their TV news off of X and Facebook than you are off of the actual TV. Then what changes during the campaign is people that usually consume nothing, then are catching the parts on TV. And I think we spoke last week, political stories in the back half of the half an hour news currently. Like I'm in Mount Gambier now, watched it tonight. It was after fuel prices. It was after everything else. It was, 8 or 9 minutes in. Last week on the back of Iran, it was 14, 15 minutes in. So it is enormously hard to get people's attention in a cramped space. And early voting started, as in kind of aged care home regional hospitals, and pre-poll starts on Saturday. Postals are out. So, we're trying to do the math today. I think we're 244 hours until polls close.
Just quick sidebar. When I lived in Adelaide and listening to the ABC morning radio, was it Matt Bevan?
Matthew Abraham and David Bevan.
That's right. And Mike Rann used to go on in the mornings and just cop an absolute basting from them to the point of almost disrespect. And it was very unbecoming of Auntie and the ABC. Yep. And I remember I listened to the ABC radio when I was in the shower, and I don't want you to have to picture this image of me in the shower, buck naked, screaming at the radio, losing my shit. Geez, I used to get under my skin. It's funny you just mentioned that that they're the most feared morning breakfast radio in the country, but it's fundamentally changed now. Whatever happened to those two? Anyway.
David Bevan's around still, and Matthew Abraham's now doing the Neil Mitchell equivalent, kind of calling in and doing 15 minutes of here's my view of the world.
On
5AA?
Yeah, I mean, that's where he should have been in the first place. He was literally playing for the wrong team. Sorry. Okay, let's get our campaign nerd on and talk about preferences on how to vote cards. Matt.
Sorry, I was all kind of ready to go there.
Oh no, I don't want to hold you back. Just go for it.
I think kind of hand in hand with how hard a campaign it has been for the Libs, after 3 weeks of essentially being tarred with could you ever fathom accepting the one nation preferences that even John Howard turned back on, kind of goading the Libs to essentially rule out one nation preferences. Corey Bernardi went out first and said, I don't even want you, never really wanted you anyway. I'm not going to preference you, and announced that they were going to do a independent ticket. So essentially, as a starting point, Labor has been, as they have traditionally, one nation last, supporting a whole lot of independents, supporting Greens everywhere where there's not an independent with a chance of winning, and then working kind of backwards down the list. The very few Nats we have here ahead of the Libs, and then ending with the orange at the end. One Nation went out first, said that their view was that Labor should not be rewarded with your preference, but the Libs are undeserving and unworthy of your preference. So preference every minor party and then choose if you want to put Labor or the Libs last. So that essentially took the power out of the Libs to do a One Nation deal, essentially. Inexplicably, 2 days later, they came out and said that they're going to preference One Nation in the lower house anyway. Ashton Hurn did it herself and had said that that is in the best interest of having non-Labor MPs elected, and that they would rather have One Nation MPs elected in those seats rather than having Labor MPs, which realistically that's not where the fights are. It's more One Nation versus soft conservative independents, I guess, for want of a better word. Not quite Teals, but kind of regional versions of Teals. Probably more a kind of Indi version of that. What's probably most quirky about that, and kind of in an inside baseball sense, whilst the Libs have done that, they haven't preferenced One Nation in the LegCo. They've left One Nation fifth in the LegCo behind some of the minor parties. So where there was benefit in doing it in exchange for One Nation giving them back to them, well, they didn't get that because Corey had already said no. And where they were doing it in an exchange to hopefully shore up a third LegCo spot, they've not done that because they put One Nation behind the other minor parties, again, which we'll get to later in a LegCo sense. So it's kind of no harm, no foul, other than they're forever going to be tarred as the group that preferenced the orange side at the height of the craziness.
Hannah, were you surprised by this?
Well, the day that the Liberals came out with saying that they're going to preference One Nation, I believe was the same day that Corey Bernardi reaffirmed his belief that same-sex marriage is a slippery slope towards bestiality. So that just why do it? Why do it for nothing in return?
And I think everyone's favourite political commentator, Tom Kurtzentonis, was the first person on the forum formerly known as Twitter saying how much of the voters of Unley, Bragg, Morphett, Hyson, how are they going to love to hear about this? So I said, in a pure political pragmatism sense, you could understand doing it for the LegCo deal if that was a really hard choice you wanted to make and say, we can't stand Corey can't stand us, let's just hold our nose and do the deal. Corey had already said no, and then they did it anyway, and there's no LegCo benefit to it. So sometimes, where do you end up when you're trying to find sense where sense isn't is? Where sense doesn't exist?
Further on the Liberal preferences, they also came out quite strongly saying they're going to preference their former leader, David Spears, last after he was convicted of criminal charges, yet they did not give the same treatment to two other independents who are either alleged or they may both be alleged criminals. So again, just another, but there's, I think we've said previously, the vote is split on the right so much. You can really preference a few others before you're preferencing these people.
It felt like the Liberal Party negotiating team obviously approached One Nation and said, let's do a deal. We'll give you preferences in the upper house to ensure you get, maybe jag a second or even maybe a third. In return, we want your preferences in the lower house across the board. And maybe we'll also preference you higher than Labor in the lower house as well, just as sort of as an assurance policy. and they've said no, and they've left standing there going, well, what do we do now? We've got to make a decision in the lower house about our preferences. It's either going to go to Labor or it's going to go to One Nation. And I'm assuming there would have been a debate saying, well, if we preference One Nation, to your point, Matt, and to the point of Minister Koutsantonis, how does that play out in traditional blue rinse, blue ribbon Liberal eastern suburb seats of Adelaide versus the regions? And I guess they've taken a punt and said, we can send a message to this outer suburbs into regional South Australian right-wing male voter that we rank One Nation higher than those socialists. So somehow please vote for us. I can't.
There's a not 0% chance that they'd agreed it with Corey. They'd printed the postal how to votes and Corey ratted on them and they didn't want to admit to the least bad story. Like, anything is possible here because what has transpired makes no sense. Like, there are at least four really country seats where Lib 1, One Nation 2, One Nation 1, Lib 2, in a world where booths were staffed, would have been enough to most likely save them. But if that hasn't transpired, I mean, where I am now, so Gambia, really strong history of Libs refusing to let people into their parliament and into their party room and instead losing to them as independents all the way back to 1997. This is in the middle of federal Barker. There is an enormous chance where the Libs run fourth on primary.
That's nuts. That is crazy. What did we see from Labor's preferences? Because one thing that's sort of come out of the last federal election was we didn't do a deal with the Greens because we finally had the courage to say, we're going to get your preferences anyway. We don't need to trade off anything to you. We'll go trade something else and still get the benefit in the lower house of Green voters preferencing Labor overwhelmingly 87 to 89%. What has happened in that?
Yeah, so probably the only thing of interest, I think, as opposed to being surprised, is where Labor ended up on the Ledco preference deal. So really quick history lesson, Labor's never won 5 of the 11 Ledco seats in history until last time when Russell Wortley did it, and now it's enormously likely to do so. On the back of that, you'd say on any balanced poll, Labor will get to its 5 quotas and have a pretty significant overquota left with a tiny, tiny, tiny chance of getting to 6. The Greens always struggle to get a full quota here, so they certainly won't have overflow. Labor's put cannabis 3rd, and then a couple of independents 4th, 5th and 6th. So on the back of that, I think the most interesting thing is if the polls followed, that 11th Ledco spot would now be favoured to be the first cannabis representative in the SA Parliament.
Hannah, care for your thoughts there. Why do you find that funny?
In lower house seats, there's not many options. So I think it really has just been Labor Green automatically because the rest are all on the right. So I believe potentially even this time around, if people are just numbering a 1 in the lower house ballot, there is a sort of a pre-submitted ballot that gets followed. Is that right, Matt?
Yes, so there's a savings provision now that says if your intent is the word, so if you have intended to vote, if the intention of your vote is clear, so at the last election, Jeff Brock, the minister who changed seats, beat former Deputy Premier Dan Van Holst-Pelican, he handed out a vote 1 me and then lodged a ticket. So there is a provision to do that. The independent down here, a guy called Travis Fatchin, who used to work for the former, now jailed Lib-Turn independent MP, he has put out just the 1 ticket. And again, talking about non kind of Labor preferences, there are two seats that I'm aware of. Mount Gambier is one of them, where the Libs and Labor have both put the independent who's most likely to beat them at 2, essentially guaranteeing them victory. The other one is a seat of Carvel, John Olsen's old seat when he was Premier. Dan Cregan, elected as a Liberal, then became Speaker, then became Independent, then became Minister in a Labor cabinet, and is now leaving the Parliament. He'll be replaced by a guy called Matt Schultz, who has, again, Independent, who will most likely, I think, win on primary anyway, but has ended up in a position where Labor and Libs have both put him second on the ticket, which is extraordinary when you think about it in every single way.
Let's turn to campaign content brought to you by Magic Mountain. And
I thought.
The money hasn't come through yet, Matt.
So,
Vale Ale, if you want me to try.
Oh, there you go.
Do that. Hannah, what kind of content caught your eye this week, either in a good way or a bad way?
Look, I'm going to get a bit of flack because after we spent so long criticising Ashton Hurn's ad last week, a lot of people were saying, we actually thought it was really good and we thought the voiceover was the best bit. So I'm a bit hesitant that I'm nominating.
Were these Labor people or were these Tories that were coming back at you?
A Labor MP who shan't be named.
Like I did go back and listen to the episode and that part of that analysis that we talked about, that particular 90-second thing. And I've reflected a bit more on it. And I think both of you hit the point anyway in your reflections. And it was, this is clearly appealing to blue blood Tories. This is an ad saying, look, we know we're going to lose, but I am a Tory and this ad is so just, this is me. So I guess in some ways you could say it was a good ad.
So as I said, Ashton announced an IVF policy on the weekend, and she posted it on her Instagram, and she had about 5 photos, her with babies, with mums, with dads, the normal photos. And as I was scrolling through these photos, I thought, hang on a minute, checked it, went, is this the right post? And it's a photo of Ashton dunking a basketball. She's getting serious airtime. Dunking a basketball. Just that's the standalone photo on the IVF announcement. That really caught my eye, and that it was just like she did this cool shot, and she wanted people to see it.
There were two kind of quirky bits that I saw this week, both from the seat of Carvel, which again is in and around Mount Barker. We were talking about corflutes. Obviously, corflutes have been banned. The local independent guy called Matt Schultz has got the owner of the Oakbank Hotel to put a corflute on either side of the enormous black bull, which is kind of sitting on top of the roof. So everybody driving through the Adelaide Hills gets a double-sided view of Matt Schultz. There's some campaign content when I shared that showing that the Lib candidate up there, a guy called Bradley Orr, is his corflute outside a hotel, and it's somehow alongside the chalkboard, whilst the chalkboard is advertising Dumbass Night, which is, what was that Howard thing from the SCG years ago where the guys wearing the T-shirt saying I'm with stupid with the arrows?
Yeah. Well, that sounds like we're slipping into our weekly nominations brought to you by the Popeye and Ann Mills. Probably unanswerable questions from this week. Who's got one of these?
You can go first, Stephen.
Look, I just saw on 7 News Adelaide during the week about the corflute wars. Obviously, there's no longer the ability to post or bunt up a corflute on a Stobie pole, but obviously people are now sticking them on their front yards and whatnot. And it was this article.
And cows.
And cows, yeah, and next to chalkboards. And it was a minute 30 dedicated to people pinching corflutes. And I was like, oh, my God. Democracy is a beautiful thing. It's also a precious thing. But how bad is it that the news has sent out a camera crew to interview libs who have stuck a camera above their corflute to track the person who's stealing their corflute? Probably unanswerable questions. When are we going to stop caring about corflutes? Can we just all just say that no one's going to win a vote by having a massive headshot of the candidate with their name and their party colours? It's just not going to shift a vote. Can we just stop, please, caring about corflutes? I just find it fascinating.
Yeah, I think the other part has been here. So in terms of, in a law sense, it's been that they can't be in public places. So can't be on Stobie pole, can't be in those things, but they can be on public property. So I was talking to Deputy Premier Ma the other day, and he was saying that he was up in the hills at a pub and they had a corflute of the lib on the fence because they'd agreed to put it on the lib. And he just said, so he had a crack at them and said, why isn't there a Labor one there? And by the time he'd left, there was a Labor one on the fence of the pub next to the lib one. So I think it's almost as whoever asked first. Like can I leave my brochure on your counter? I was talking to another member who like Hannah, I won't name, saying that they were at a post door knocking kind of drinks event, and again there was a opponent's corflute there, and by the time they'd left, there were two of theirs on either side of the opponent's one that was there when they got there. So I think it does kind of become the silly, I'll put mine next to yours, and then you'll put more, and then we'll put more, and they'll all just get ignored by everybody.
I look back to my own career in Young Labor and the obsession that even I had at getting up at midnight on election night and going to like 8 polling centres and just completely Christmas wrapping the boundary of the St Kilda primary school and being so obsessed with it. Like I get it, there's a bit of fun and excitement, but you just get to a point where like, what is the point of this? True story. Ari Suss and I don't know if I should name check Ari. I know he does listen to the podcast, but him and I during, I can't remember what federal election it was, but it was in the early 2000s in Melbourne Ports. We got to a particular primary school in Middle Park super, super early, like 3 a.m. And we're like, yes, we'll beat the Tories because they're normally here at this time. Covered the entire school in Labor Party bunting and corflutes. Came back the next morning at about 8 o'clock just to check on the booth captain to see how they're going. We'd covered the wrong school. It was the parish church hall on the other side of the street. Anyway, and got an absolute earful from the booth captain. Why did you friggin' idiots do? Like, fuck off,
that's
I got up at 3 a.m. Anyway, sorry, I digress. Hannah, do you have a nomination for probably answerable questions this week?
We've sort of discussed it a little bit. It's when are the Liberals properly going to vet their candidates? After this candidate for Wake came out with these comments from a podcast, fellas, you need to be careful what you say on podcasts because it lasts forever. So it wouldn't have been that hard to double check, you would have thought.
There's an Adelaide Now story up now saying that he's working in campaign office. So not only did they let him run an unwinnable seat, but they put the bloke in campaign HQ. And like this stuff's not like, this isn't borderline stuff. Like this is batshit crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
100%. I mean, I completely agree. And I was talking to some South Australians over the weekend and sort of asking them from the campaign's perspective, noms have closed now. How to vote cards have been decided. Postal vote applications are done. People are about to start voting. It's now time for the dirt unit to kind of start to unearth all of these little hidden treasures and all of these nasty Liberal and, Greens and whoever else candidates. And I was getting a bit worried that we were running it a bit too late. But as soon as I said that, it's all now started to appear. And in particular, we've already seen one. And I imagine that there'll be more to come. And to your point, Hannah, the Liberals, I think, nationwide are notoriously bad at vetting. Or if they are vetting, they are so desperate for anyone with a heartbeat to run on a Liberal ticket that they'll say, look, let's just risk it and see if we get through and hope to God that the Labor Party's dirt unit isn't going to pick up this stuff. But this particular candidate, they said this in July last year. It's not like someone had to forensically dig through, like had to go to the South Australian Museum and get out the fish. What was that stuff called? The
microfish.
Yeah, the microfish, right? And go through really, really old documents. This is literally something that happened last year. So they're just in a bad way.
We know it's the undoing of these minor parties. It was at Nick Xenophon party. You try to fill as many seats as possible. One Nation, you try to fill as many seats as possible. But you have a few unhinged people running for those seats. People maybe look the other way. But a major party shouldn't be having candidates like this.
No, not at all. Matt?
I think what is interesting in terms of the dirt file stuff is, I think we spoke last week, Labor's made a pretty clear choice to call One Nation unworthy of votes, but kind of leave them alone and let let the Libs kind of wallow in that. I am interested before pre-poll Saturday where if there is an attack to be made on Corey's not the friend of the battlers, One Nation's not the friend of the working class, whether there are negatives there or whether there are negatives at pre-poll on Saturday saying these guys aren't your mates. And if you were going to do it, you'd do it late. It's now Wednesday night. If you're going to do it, that's a Thursday, Friday, or a pre-poll thing on Saturday. We might have 30% of people vote on Saturday. Like we might have 30% of the vote be done in a single day on Saturday. I saw the Nightcliff stuff last week. Sorry, completely digressing now. 25% of people voted polling day.
Really?
25% of people voted polling day.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it? I mean, I know the much smaller electorates, both in voters population and actual physicality, but geez, that's remarkable.
It's only about 60% voted, though, overall. So very, very small numbers.
So 15 people in Nightcliff voted. Is that what you're telling me, Anna?
1,500, yeah.
1,500. And they actually preference Greens first and Labor won on preferences. So there you go.
Yeah.
Good to be back in Darwin.
Yeah. Just to build off of that, Matt, I don't want to milk this probably answerable questions one, but I think that's something that the party has to start to get its head around, is that if we are going to construct a contrast argument against our opponents, it can't just be the Liberal Party or the Greens. We saw in the Bendigo, the last federal election in Bendigo, the amount of money that the Nats spent in that seat against Lisa Chess's, like close to 1.2 million was the number reported. The lesson from that Lisa Chess's in Bendigo.
Chester, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, in Bendigo. If they're dropping that kind of money, then we're going to have to be in that space as well and start to take down their candidate, because basically they dropped all that money and there was no criticism against their candidate, but there was no forensic research on that candidate either. If One Nation are going to front up to a state poll or a national poll with 22, 23, 24% primary in the polling, then they are absolutely prime for criticism and a target as well. And I'm sure. I'd like to think that the South Australian CHQ is going to start to pick out some of these candidates, because there'd be absolute rich pickings from absolute crazy town that they've been nominating. Okay, hot take of the week,
Hannah.
A member here, Connie Benares, a Greek woman, gave an absolute hot take on Corey Bernardi this week. I'll quote her verbatim. There is a special Greek word for people like Corey Bernardi and the repugnant and vile views that he has shared, and that word is malaka. Just thought it was brilliant.
Right. Very West Adelaide. And she would know because she was a former member of One Nation, correct?
No, SA Best. So that's the other party.
Oh, she's ex-Xenophon.
Yeah.
Long orange.
She's still the Xenophon party, SA Best. Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Learn something every day. Mel Meninga in over my head award, and I called this last week that this was a potential, and it turns out it only took me 7 days to be right. Chris McDermott has gone from running in the lower house to running in the upper house to now not running at all.
Yeah, so go back 7 weeks. So Chris McDermott, Hall of Fame AFL player, champion Glenelg footballer, and this is important here, champion Glenelg footballer, southwestern suburbs of Adelaide. 7 weeks ago, surprises everyone by being, Sarah Game elected One Nation.
That's what I was thinking about.
Because her mum was the One Nation Senate candidate. I remember those two elections overlapped, March 22 and May 22. So Sarah won, her mum then lost. Her mum then tried to kick her out of the party, and it's been a complete mess. She then leaves One Nation on the way through. So she unveils Bone, as he's affectionately known, and the star candidate in Dunstan, which is Norwood, which is a long way away from Glenelg, which makes no sense on day one. Most of the commentary on day one was, that's mad, because he may claw 10, 12% of the vote in Dunstan, but he's not going to turn the dial anyway. He just happens to live there. wouldn't it make more sense if he runs for the Legco? Someone is already in the number one spot for the Legco, but that doesn't matter much here because someone was in the One Nation spot before Corey, kicked them down to 2 as well. So a week after that, McDermott announces that, oh no, he's now going to be the number one spot on the, it's called Fair Go, Fair Australia party upstairs. So Chris is going to be the number one on the ticket. Campaigns around the place, gets a pretty soft kind of media run, as you'd expect at the start. I was in Port Lincoln for a couple of days and saw him over there campaigning and enormously popular. And then does enormously well preference-wise. So the Libs put him second on the Legco ticket. Labor put him fourth on the Legco ticket. So if he were to get 3%, he can get a seat from there. So noms closed 2 Fridays ago. Tickets are out. Preference deal's done this Monday. Postal votes go out. And then he does a press conference today, says, I've had a gutful, Meninga style. I'm out. I can't work with Sarah anymore. Sarah does a press conference and says, there's no loyalty in politics. We used to be friends, but now we're not friends anymore. It's too late to tear up the ballot paper. She tells people to not vote for him, which is her party, but to vote for the Libs because she doesn't want people to vote for him. And he tells people, vote for me, I'm an independent. So you've got a woman who was surprisingly elected under One Nation, who then stole that 8-year term from her party, irrespective of what the party is, criticising a bloke for just taking it to the next level where he's stolen a seat before a vote's been cast. He's stolen a seat in the period between nomination and closing and a vote being cast. And there is, there is a 1 or 2% chance that he is elected because of this enormous preference deal he's got. So if you take that to its kind of conclusion, the Lib printed how to vote Legco ticket, which will go out in all 47 seats, is currently preferencing an empty chair at 2.
You couldn't write that.
No. So I did see, I was talking to Hannah before, Stacey Lee, former ABC reporter, former Sky reporter, she's now 5AA. She interviewed him this afternoon and said, have you done a Meninga? And it went pretty badly and he took enormous offence and was trying to explain there was a significant difference between 7 minutes and 7 weeks, but here we are.
I wonder if he'd watched the video and said, maybe Mel's onto something. Yeah, I don't want to do this.
Well, I've had a gutful.
Yeah. Okay, and marginal seat Hunger Games.
So this is my favourite thing of the campaign. After the extraordinary former electoral efforts of our colleague Hannah here in the seat of Hammond, introducing herself to the people of Murray Bridge and surrounds. So Hammond is a seat of Murray Bridge, Strathalbyn, kind of hour 15 out of Adelaide, former kind of meat worker town, the railway towns, etc. Hammond has the seat of Strathalbyn has 2,000 votes. At the last election, Labor got 20.8% of about 420 of them. And last Friday, 15 days out from the election campaign, that's where the Premier was. So if we're talking about where the kind of where the electoral map is currently being drawn, you've got the Premier in a seat that hasn't been held by Labor since a guy called Gabe Bywaters in the 50s and the 60s. And that's where that effort is being spent, working with a highly popular mayor of the Mid-Murray Council, which is Mannum. Simone Bailey is the candidate's name. And that's where the Premier and the Premier's officers' efforts were 15 days out from the campaign. And we'll revisit that as the next answer as well.
The photos of Mally visiting, doing a street walk with the candidate, I've never seen a candidate smile so much in my life. It was grinning from ear to ear. It was just like, that is just joy right there. Hannah, probably unanswered question, why aren't you running in Strathalbyn? Like this was, here's your chance. Come on.
The party should be appreciative. I was just warming up the seat.
Any other marginal seat Hunger Games from you, Hannah?
I've been sent in Colton. So Colton is a seat like Henley Beach area for those who know Adelaide. In a west, the Labor candidate is Aria Bolkus, Nick Bolkus's daughter. The Liberal candidate is a freshie, apparently fighting very hard to get any sort of resources, any big announcements in the electorate. And then you've got an independent former fair guy, I believe, as well, actually.
He was the last guy that left them, yeah.
Running in Colton as well. But anytime you see Malinauskas, you'll see Aria's head popping up behind him. So that's been one big focus for Labor.
I'm loving it. I just wish we talked about this before we started recording, but can they hurry up and just release the betting odds for some of these seats so we can jump on some of these?
In time.
We'll have to dedicate the entire episode next week just to, yeah. Do we have a nomination for In This Economy Award?
Yeah, so going back to the seat of Hammond again. So Murray Bridge is my hometown, so hence my excitement out of this. So Murray Bridge on the river, one of the first crossings. From about the 1950s, there's been this world's ugliest mechanical thing which they call a bunyip, which is essentially a monster. So if you go down to Sturt Reserve, there's a cesspit pond in a fake cave, and you put 20 cents in, and it's probably a swipe card now. And then this thing gurgles, and those at home will need to Google it. Birth of the bunyip. And the water gurgles, and this huge, horrible green monster holding this little baby comes up and scares the shit out of everyone. And I've actually gone back and watched old videos, and it was refurbished in the early 80s, and it started as a show ride or something. Anyway, it's a
It's Adelaide. It's South Australia's Puff and Billy. That's what it is.
It's a very Murray Bridge thing. And at the time of cost of living and everything else, Hammond candidate Simone Bailey, there's a video of her with, I'm not sure if it's Deputy Premier Kyan Ma, or it might be, Deputy Premier Kyan Ma. And a re-elected Malinauskas government will invest $320,000 to refurbish and move Bertha the Bunyip to where the people of Hammond want her to go. And I'm not going to stop telling that story for years to come.
I think we need to add in another category called Peak South Australia, or maybe just call it Heaps Good. The Heaps Good Award. That's got to be the Heaps Good Award for this week for sure.
Bertha the Bunyip, look her up.
Wonderful. Any other In This Economies from you, Hannah?
Nothing from me.
All right. Well, then, Hannah, I'll go to you next for our final category, which is Who Won the Week?
It's tricky. It wasn't a good week for Labor, but I'm not sure that the Liberals capitalised on it as much as they could have. So I'm going to chicken out and call it a draw.
And a missed opportunity by the sounds of it too.
It's just the consistency. I think if it was more consistency, I think it could have landed a bit better.
Matt?
Last time we spoke, it was 16 days until polling day. It's now 8 days until polling day. And, TikTok, they haven't been able to turn the dial. Agree with Hannah. People would be, enormously, distressed at how the media stuff has played out this week, and not only taken away from the days, but certainly had some pretty horrible things said about people. My view on campaigns is it's about days and it's about winning days. And we've gone from 16 to 8. People are going to start casting their votes Saturday morning. And opposition's running out of runway to be able to see any kind of reversal in the polls as where they currently are. 10 days, rather. 16 days to 10 days. You're right. Time's running out. And time is running out if you want to volunteer on the campaign as well. I meant to do this last week and I forgot all about it. We'll drop a link in our show notes. If you want to volunteer for the Labor campaign, go to the South Australian Labor's website and click on the link for volunteer. I'm sure one of the organisers on one of the campaigns will be in touch, particularly now that votes are going to start being cast early next week or from Saturday onwards.
it basically is election day all the way till Saturday, and the only thing that we can do is have conversations with targeted voters. So get out there and knock 30 doors for one of your local Labor candidates, and there's plenty of seats that we can go after. So you don't have to be picky.
You can go out to Strathalbyn if you like.
And I think on that point, pre-poll will be significantly different this time. So we've cut pre-poll down from 4 weeks to 1 week. So we have Saturday being March 14th and then Sunday off, and then the 5 days before polling day. There's kind of one major pre-poll booth per metropolitan seat. There's a couple of shared ones, but not really. They're in, I'd argue, pretty clunky, pretty hard to get to locations as well. So the volume of traffic that's going to go through pre-poll on Saturday and then on from 8 to 10 a.m. in those metropolitan seats Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I think will be enormous. And if we're talking about turning the dial, that's where we need the most effort, in my view. So get out there.
Absolutely. Other things to note, if you haven't completed our Socially Democratic listener survey and go into the draw to win a trip to Adelaide to the 2026 ALP National Conference, please do. It'll take literally 3 minutes to complete it. We've got a bunch of other episodes that are happening in the next sort of week or so. The mailbag episode was meant to be recorded last night. I'm up in the Blue Mountains on doing a workshop with the FIFPro, which is the global union that represents professional footballers. And I've literally combined three passions in my life, which is community organising, unions, and football. And I actually it's here for 4 days. I'm wearing a different football jersey each day to the trainings. It's I'm not going to get away with wearing a football kit to work, but I'm loving it. It's been fantastic. But anyway, it's been fantastic, but I've been flat out. We're not finishing until late, so we weren't able to record the mailbag episode this week. We're recording it next week, so it'll be up next week. So if you're on Patreon, you've still got a chance to send in some topics that you want myself, Todd Pinkerton, or Lissy to listen to. Otherwise, Hannah, myself, and Matt will be back next week. We're recording next week's episode on Wednesday evening, so we'll drop it sometime Thursday. I think we've got probably a couple of debates to watch and review as well, which we haven't actually had a chance to do. I'm looking forward to that.
So the first one's this Friday, so kind of 36 hours, 44 hours from now is the first debate this Friday, Chamber of Commerce and the Press Club. And then next Wednesday, before we record next Wednesday night, is the Sky Tizer simulcast one. ABC is doing this Fridays. Great.
Hannah MacLeod, thank you very much for your contributions today.
Thank you. Can I just finish on I hosted Kate Ellis and Christopher Pine last night for an election panel and got a couple of tidbits from Christopher. The first is he thinks the Liberals are going to end up with double digits. So we'll track if his prediction is correct. And
primary
the second
is primary or
seats. That would be dire. And the second is a podcast is like a beach house. Everybody has one.
100%. No doubt about it. Look, I just felt that when I started this in 2019 that middle-class white men's voices weren't being heard, and I just thought I'd go in and fill that vacuum.
Now's your time.
There's a Liberal candidate that I think has similar views.
Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Good way to end, Hannah. And I want to end it right there, but I've got to say goodbye to you as well, Matt. Matt, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for all. Bertha the Bunyip. Look it up.
Indeed. And we'll see you all next week, team. Hey, Social Democrats. Thanks for listening. Today's episode was hosted by myself, Stephen Donnelly, and produced by Grace Eyre. If you like the show, please rate us and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really like the show, then join our Patreon community for early and ad-free access to each episode. We regularly take questions and comments from our Patreon members, so get in there if you want to have your say. And finally, get all the latest updates and bonus content by following Socially Democratic on our social media channels. The links are in our show notes. See you next Friday.